everybody. Thanks for watching. We're here with another exciting session. I'm A.M. Grabelny. I'm a solution architect here at AWS. One of your hosts today, as we're talking about some exciting new announcements from AWS Glue. I'm here with Kinshuk and Jeff. Jeff Barr, you want to introduce yourself first?
Sure, great to be here. And I'm Jeff Barr, VP and Chief Evangelist for AWS.
Awesome. Kinshuk, tell us about you.
I'm Kinshuk Pahare. I'm a Principal Product Manager on AWS Glue.
Okay, wonderful. So we're talking about Glue today. We've had 4 announcements, right?
Yep.
We'll go through each of those. But I think before we do anything else, right? What if I've never heard of Glue? Give me the high level. Tell me why I should care about Glue. What is Glue going to do for me?
Yes, absolutely. So Glue is the data integration service. It's serverless, which means that there's no infrastructure to manage. But what it does is, it allows customers to actually create these data lakes and move data for the purpose of, machine learning, application development, and analytics.
Okay. So you said serverless, which is a great lead-in, but let's go a little bit deeper on that. What does that really mean for our customer?
Yeah, so as a serverless data integration service, the biggest advantage that Glue has is that as a data engineer, you do not have to worry too much about infrastructure management. So all you do is, I'm going to create a business logic. Now you can create the business logic visually in the form of drag and drop interface, or you can create a business logic in the form of a code. And regardless of how you do it, it's a fire and forget system. So you just submit this as a job, and Glue just takes care of rest.
So I'd imagine that the serverless model would work really well, given that most customers are probably not bringing in data continuously, but it's cyclic or occasional or whenever they happen to think they need to do an update. Is that right?
Yeah, so I think the ideal scenario, obviously, is that you create this ETL pipeline or you create this data integration workflow, and you can forget about this, right? Because, hey, what could go wrong? It's running on a schedule, it's running on demand, it's running on event-based system. But the problem is the business is not fixed, right? You have these events, specifically things like, last week we had tax day. So those events actually create this environment where your data varies. So maybe the size of the data varies, or your line of business suddenly says, hey, you know what? I need to integrate this inventory data, which is on this system, and I have my sales data on the CRM system. And those use cases come in because obviously customers are looking for to get more value from their data. So now in all these cases, the demand fluctuates. Now, as a data engineer, my job is to figure out, to right size this compute or right size this data integration pipeline based on the input, which is the biggest challenge. And with, with auto scaling, right? Which is the first announcement, we are actually removing that, removing that complexity for data engineers.
Yeah, I mean that's not their expertise necessarily, right? Like as a data engineer, you're not typically getting into operations necessarily, and so that you're kind of not aligned to the right choice of work when you're having to run operations in addition to also caring about the data.
Exactly. Like I think capacity planning is one of those areas which is the dreaded two-letter word in front of data engineer. So the idea is that and what end up happening, right? In real world, what end up happening is either you over provision, which means that it's costing you more, or you under provision, which sort of increases the probability of failure in the data integration. And auto scaling specifically is to sort of allow all this, eliminate all this complexity.
Now, when we talk about customer data and jobs and scale, what kind of order of magnitude are we talking about for like a regular customer or an ambitious customer?
Yeah, so this is another interesting situation, right? So the data size is growing rapidly, and now we are looking at petabyte scale ingestion pipelines, and at that scale, any incremental change to capacity provisioning under or over could have significant consequences to your cost or the probability of failure.
Interesting. Okay, so we actually should talk about cost for a bit. So what is the interplay of the auto scaling and the cost to our customers?
Yeah, so so specifically the way it works is that with auto scaling, we actually proactively look at idle compute, which is not doing anything, right? In a data integration workload, you have various scenarios, right? So when you are doing a read operation, you don't need the entire cluster. You probably just need the initial driver just to do the read. And with Glue auto scaling, what we have done is we have actually automatically figured out the idle executors, and we shut those down. And when there is a requirement, when you need to process some data, you actually scale it up, and then again you scale it down. And this is actually built for the purpose of data integration, which means that we are actually data aware that that executor is not processing any data, and which means our response time is much faster.
Okay. Now, how does this interplay into the destination or the downstream services? Do things work best when those are auto scaled as well?
Yeah. So in this case, when the most common pattern is to saving the data into S3, right? So while saving the data into S3, you are looking for multiple parallel writes, right? So if you are looking at a 100 node cluster, you want to make sure all 100 nodes in parallel can write data into S3 just to get the best value out of the system.
Got it.
Makes sense. And look, it's great. You can now auto scale these jobs. These jobs are running in your cluster. Somebody's got to write those jobs, right? So my understanding is we launched interactive sessions and job notebooks today. How does it make it easier for data engineers across the business to start writing these jobs?
So Werner is like one of my favorite speakers. I think last reInvent he talked about launching primitives, right? AWS is all about launching primitives. And I think what I like to say like about interactive sessions specifically, right, is that it's yet another primitive. So I talked about the job primitive. So Glue offers a job primitive, which is a fire and forget system. You write your job and you send it over. With Interactive Sessions API, what we have done is we have actually created a sessions primitive to allow developers to get their own environment in under a minute. So in under a minute, you set up this environment, do your work, and then it automatically scales down.
Okay. Now, it's been a while since I've really been deep with Glue. So we start with some data. We've got this raw data. We want to bring it in. We want to get it to somewhere. What are the customer options and choices that they can do in the middle? Are these the things that they would set up in their notebooks?
Yeah, so I think in the middle, so you have a bunch of sources, data sources, and then maybe S3 is the data lake destination because that's the preferred choice for a lot of our customers. Glue basically sits in the middle. It is capable of connecting to all the data sources and sort of writing it into S3. Like that's at a very, very high level, that's the pipeline. Now, as a data engineer, you sit in the middle. And the best course of action is like today, your options are, let me just set up my own Spark environment. And it will take, 10 minutes for that environment to be up and running. And because it's always running, you share the cost by sharing that environment with other developers. Right. So you basically say, this Spark cluster, let's have, 5, 6, 8, 10 developers sharing the same environment. And that leads to the noisy neighbor problem, right? So number one, you are running this cluster all the time. Number two, you are running into this noisy neighbor problem where one developer is running a complex query, which is impacting your work. And with interactive session, and I think the third problem, which is, again, very common, is that, hey, I went for a long weekend and forgot to turn off my cluster, which, again, is another problem that, hey, it leads to cost increase. So with interactive sessions, what we have said is it's a simple API, AWS Glue create session, and you can hook that API into the IDE of your choice. because every developer has their favorite IDE or development environment or notebook environment. So when you connect your favorite notebook or development environment to the Sessions API, you get your own dedicated Spark environment in under a minute. So in under a minute, you get a fast Spark environment, which means that, hey, as a developer, I'm more comfortable shutting that environment down if I'm going for a coffee or lunch, because I know it's going to be ready in a minute. If I know that it's going to take 10 minutes for it to be ready, chances are I'll probably say, you know what, let's not shut it down. So now you are in the middle, you start this environment, and then you have built-in connectors. You connect to all the data sources that you are interested in. You run your SQL query, and you get the result right then and there. And you do the interactive development, maybe edit some code. And once you're satisfied with the outcome, you can just submit this as a job. You can say, you know what, run this job every Sunday or every 4 hours or when the file lands in S3. And that simplifies the entire development experience.
Okay. So the idea with the interactive sessions is I develop, I test, I iterate at small scale on part of my data. And then once I say, okay, I've got it the way I want it, then I set up my job and then let it chew through my petabytes.
Exactly.
Yeah, I used to do a bit of this back in the day before there were a lot of these tools, and you would have to hit this API and then hit another API and then join the data like locally, and then just do that a couple calls so you could get like what the data is going to look like and experiment on. Oh well, these two fields are the same across these two records, so like now I could join on that. And it sounds like that's exactly what you're doing in this one environment. Is that right? Letting people experiment on their data before you run the full job.
And exactly, like, so you can actually experiment with the data, and you can not only experiment with the data, you can actually play it in an environment where you're not impacting anything else. It's a
Oh,
low
nice.
cost, low structure, low impact environment. It's just your development environment.
That's great.
So AM, those kind of environments that you described, they always seem so simple and straightforward and easy until they've just turned into this utterly intractable and scalable mess, right?
Yep, absolutely. Yeah, and look, like ETL is generally not everyone's favorite job, right? Like ETL is not the most exciting thing to do on the planet. Not that it doesn't have its place at its time, but yeah, you're right. Like as soon as something goes wrong very, very hard, and it's very difficult to fix.
Yeah, it's the thing that you have to do to get to the really fun part of whatever it is you're trying to achieve. Like just getting the data in, it's like, okay, yeah, just to get the data, but it's let's analyze it, understand it, use it to make our business better. That's what our customers really want to do.
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay. So I know you also launched something called sensitive data detection. What's that all about?
Yeah, so now I think this is the fun part. I think to your last comment, right? Getting to the fun part, uh, the the biggest challenge is scale, right? Like if you are, as more and more customers use analytics to build these data lakes, what end up happening is that you are relying on end user inputs. So as an end user, suppose you are supposed to put social security number on a certain box, and instead of that box, you fat fingered it into a free form text box. So all the compliance and all the security or privacy controls that you have to protect that data are just went right out of the window, because now it's in a free form text. And now multiply this with the petabyte data problem, right? It's a petabyte scale, so it's literally like looking for a hay in the in a big farm of hay. So and that's where I think Glue allows you to actually distribute this workload. And so Glue comes with a distributed engine. It allows you to distribute or partitions across hundreds of executors. So now what's happening is that whatever policy that you configured, right, you can configure your own definition of sensitive data, right? Everyone has a different definition of sensitive data. You can use the built-in sensitive data definitions like driving license number, credit card number, SSNs, and then you can apply this. You can configure this. First of all, you can configure this visually. Like you don't have to know any programming. You can do drag and drop interface. But then it gets distributed across hundreds of nodes. So which means each node is looking at its own partition. And then you can come up with a remediation, whether you want to redact it, you want to report, you want to erase it. You can do all that at scale.
Okay, so this is helping our customers to protect the data of their customers.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Now you mentioned like social security numbers and driver licenses. Is there a fixed set of those and some regular expressions or something that define those, or do our customers get to build their own?
Yeah, so our customers can actually build their own. They can define these patterns on the Visual Studio API. Oh, sorry, on the Glue Studio API. Pause. They can define these on Glue Studio, and that allows you to actually configure it and then distribute this, like use the Glue engine for distributed analysis.
Okay, so whatever state or country they might be processing data for, they can customize it for the kinds of identifiers
or for the industry they are in, right? Exactly, for the industry they are in, or for the country they are in, and so on.
Okay. Now, do we ever use those patterns the other way around as like a data validation or data check?
Yeah, so you can actually so Glue ships with built-in transforms, so you can actually figure out things like find matches. You can also do checks around existence of a value, or you can fill the missing values, because again, in all these cases, you want to make sure that your pipeline is producing an output that can be used for the further analysis by your application developer or your ML team.
Okay. Now, when I hear about this and the way you've described it, it sounds clearly the value is there at large scale and for what we always say, like the enterprise customer. But what would maybe the more modest sized customer or the not quite an enterprise, when would they know that it's appropriate for them to take their spaghetti mess they've built and start using Glue instead?
Yeah, and I think this is where Glue, the advantage of Glue is that it doesn't matter what's the size of the data, right? Because we can scale from a very small data set to petabyte scale. And as I mentioned earlier, the cost of your data processing is a function of the data that you processed, which means that, again, you're not stuck with some licensing. Pause. The cost of the processing is actually a function of the data that you process, which means that it's suitable for small businesses as well as the enterprises.
So this is actually a great benefit of the serverless attribute, is that you maybe you don't have petabytes, maybe you've got tens of megabytes, but you still actually want to get value from Glue. It sounds like it's very cost effective and straightforward to do that.
Exactly, and without having to worry about infrastructure management or hiring that skill set, which is expertise in infrastructure management. You can just focus on the persona that works best for your organization.
Yeah, this is perhaps the aspect of scale and serverless that isn't always fully appreciated, is that scaling down to modest sized projects and jobs is sometimes as important to scaling up to petabyte sized.
Yeah, that's a very good point, Jeff.
For sure. We've got about a minute left here. I always like to ask, number one, if I want to learn more about Glue, where do I go? How do I get started? Number two, if there's anything you want the audience to go check out, maybe another session at the summit or anything. Do you have anything to plug?
Yeah, absolutely. So there are quite a few 300 level sessions at the summit. So I do encourage everyone to check those out around sensitive data detection, auto scaling, or interactive sessions in the Studio Notebook.
Cool.
Excellent.
Getting started. Where should I go?
And for getting started, just aws.amazon.com/glue.
Wonderful. That's easy.
Couldn't be any easier. All right, this has been great. I've learned or relearned some great facts about Glue, and hope our customers are going to enjoy and get some great value from it.
Yeah, and I only felt partially attacked by that spaghetti mess comment that Jeff made. I know it wasn't directed at me, but maybe it was.
I've built my own spaghetti many times.
Yeah, me too. Me too. All right. Thank you all for watching. Stick around. We've got a lot more content for you. I'm AM, joined by Kinshuk and Jeff Barr. Stick around.